I was raised beneath the language that was colder than the stone, where belonging had a border and a border had a throne. Every difference was a fracture, every fracture caught a flaw. Every flaw became a reason to determine what I was. They could read me by their standards, they could weigh me by their scale, but a scale designed for shadows cannot measure what prevails. I remember being smaller in a room that called me small, learning how a human spirit can be measured by a wall. But the wall was never nature, it was only architecture. And the structure of a prison doesn't make the prison less. And I found beneath the language, beneath judgment, beneath shame, there was nothing there but echoes trying to answer for my name. So I stopped, not from weakness, not from fear. I simply stopped confusing their perception with my being. I am not the sum of voices that was speaking over me. I am not the weight of hands that tried to shape what I should be. What was written on my body wasn't written in my blood. What was buried in my silence wasn't buried in my soul. But their name was never what I was.
I know what they called me, I know what they believed. I know the shape of every chain they wanted me to wear. But names can lose their power when the name refused the frame. I walked out of their language, I returned without the name. I am not what they remember, I am not what they condemned. I am not the final chapter of a story they began. There are things beneath the surface that no judgment can contain. They could measure what they saw, but they could never name the flame. I went inward where the noise became a residue of years, where the architecture of the mind was molded out of fears, where the memory kept records in a language without ink, where the deepest truths were buried underneath what I was taught to think. I learned to separate the voice from what the voice declared, separate the womb from who I am, the judgment from the stairs, separate the fear from what is real, the memory from the truth, and what remained, not innocence. Something harder, something temper, something forged beneath the pressure without becoming pressure, not revenge. Something older, the quiet recognition that my worth was never theirs to measure. There is a difference between surviving what was given and allowing what was given to become your definition. I remember, but I do not kneel. I don't need to erase the past to stand beyond its reach. I don't need to curse the hand to outgrow what it could teach. I have seen what power becomes when it forgets the human soul. I've seen certainty become violence, seen possession dressed as control. So if I ever carry power, let it deepen, never harden. Let it open what is living, not determine who is worthy. Let my strength become a shelter that does not require surrender. Let my presence leave a doorway where another heart can enter. Because I know what it is like when a doorway disappears, when the world becomes a corridor and the corridor becomes your years. So I won't become another wall, I won't become another voice that tells another soul you are only what I choose. You are only what I choose. I have crossed the internal border between the person I was given and the person I discovered. I have broken through the language that was built to keep me distant from the center of my being. Let them keep their category.
let them keep their hierarchy. Let them keep the old vocabulary of authority and certainty. I don't need their permission to become what I have become. I don't need their recognition to recognize myself. The years I survived, the truths I uncovered, the silence I entered, the self I recovered. I know what they call me, I know what they believe, but a name is only a surface when the soul refuses the sea. Shadow, it is standing in the presence of the shadow, without mistaking it for yourself. I remember, I understand, I release, and what remains, remains mine. The awareness, the depth, the life. They gave me a name, I gave myself a meaning. They gave me a place, I found my own horizon. They gave me a story, I walked beyond the ending, and now I stand where their language ends.